Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido and today it is our Champions Game rematch from Season A2 because it is the Cinnabar Blazes going up against the Petalburg Razors. And let's have a look at this tale of the tape between these two sides, where for the Blazers, they're currently sitting one spot out of the top 5 and they want that chance to defend their flair as the champions, whereas the Petalburg Razors, they're actually on the bottom of the leaderboard at the moment and they need to desperately climb their way back up. But with all that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the Fire decks? Will it be the Colorless decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And starting off this matchup, it is the Verdant Cavern deck of the Petalburg Razors, moving that Stuffle into the active spot. For the Blazers, they've got the Salander from their heel turn deck going into the active spot with that Litten on the bench, and we can see the Salazzle in hand, plus their second Salander as well. It is the North Salander that only requires 1 energy in the active spot. Stuffle all by itself at the moment, but they do have that Professor's Research in hand. They've just pulled the Beware as well. They've got 2 of the Gumshoes, and they've got that Delcatty as well, as they get the Yungoos and the Pokeball thanks to the Professor's Research, and they're guaranteeing a second basic Pokemon with this Pokeball as they get the Oranguru into their hand as well, that they immediately move onto the bench alongside that Yungoos. That's all they can do this turn though, so they are going to send it over to the Blazers, who pull the Poison Barb. They've also got that Leftovers already in hand, but they can immediately go on the offensive with this Salander, and that is exactly what they're going to do, knowing that Stuffle requires 2 energy to go on the offensive. It comes back over to the Razors, who do pull the Ilma. They can remove a Pokemon from the board back into their hand if it's taken damage. It does obviously have to be a Colorless type. That is exactly what every Pokemon on the side of the Petalburg Razors are, and they do play that, moving Stuffle back into their hand to move the Yungoos into the active spot. Now they can evolve that if they so choose, but it only requires 1 energy to get online with the tackle. They're having a look at the Gumshoes there, and they're opting to go on the offensive. So that's 20 damage onto the Salander, bringing it down to 30 health. It does come back over to the Blazers. They pull a rare candy, but there's no Incineroar in hand. But what is in their hand and now in the active spot is that Heated Poison Salazzle. It does 30 damage, but it also burns and poisons the opposing Pokemon, which adds up to a total of 60 damage, and Yungoos only has 60 health. There's the 30 damage, but that poison and that burn do come into play. But not before the Leftovers does restore 10 health from the Salazzle as well. But with all that said, even though they get that checkup and they do cure the burn, what they cannot cure is that Yungoos being discarded from the board, as the Blazers take the first point in this 3-game series, where for each win in these 3 games, a team does get 2 points towards the leaderboard. Those victory points are crucial to make it into Victory Road. As that second Oranguru is pulled for the Razors, they've moved the Stuffle into the active spot, who they're going to evolve into the Beware with 130 health. Now it does have 4 energy required for that Tantrum, but they may just be laying it there to buy themselves a bit of time, as the Heatran is pulled for the Cinnabar Blazers. It was a part of the Season A2 Champions team, and they were allowed to draft from older sets, were the Blazers, because they did not have enough fire types that they could draft from the Celestial Guardians, Extradimensional Crisis, and Eevee Grove decks. As that second Heated Poison this time onto the Beware, we can see the effects of the burn and the poison taking place, as Salazzle is back at full strength thanks to the Leftovers. And with that checkup, the burn is not cured from the Beware either, as the second Stuffle has been pulled. Now Oranguru does require 3 energy as well, as that Stuffle is being considered to be moved onto the bench, but they just get the second energy onto the Oranguru. There's that burn and that poisoning again, afflicting Beware. It has 40 health remaining. Now it's cured of the burn, but that will not mean much. Salazzle has been set up so quickly, as the Torracat has been pulled for the Blazers. And it does receive that 1 energy that it does require, and another Heated Poison, another 30 damage onto the Beware. That poisoning coming into play alongside the burn, but the poison, I believe, does come into play first. There's the burn, and it will be discarded even with the checkup that is the Tails. That's 2 points already for this heel turn deck in game 1. They are running straight through this Verdant Cavern deck. The Oranguru does get moved into the active spot with this hammer in. It does 70 damage. It requires 3 energy. As the Skitty is pulled, it's immediately moved onto the bench as well. And there's that 3rd energy onto the Oranguru. Like we said, 70 damage. Salazzle did have 70 health until that Leftovers came into play, coming back over to the Blazers. They pull their second Torracat here. They've also got a Poison Barb in hand. Now they don't really, and they can't put that onto the Salazzle, but they've now got the Heatran set up with its second energy. They're going for another Heated Poison. Again, 30 more damage and those status conditions coming into play. This is not a good start for the Petalburg Razors. They're trying to avenge their Season A2 Champions game loss to the Cinnabar Blazes. They were one game shy of becoming our season's champions and having the flair for themselves this season. Razors do pull their own Poison Barb. They are going to get the Delcatty online as Oranguru still has that burn to contend with alongside the poisoning. They do get an energy onto the Delcatty here as well as that Poison Barb. They're trying to take their time here. They move that Primate's Trap Oranguru onto the bench. They're having a look at their Oranguru. They can get a point here. That Hammering is enough to discard Salazzle from the board, but they're going to retreat their Oranguru, curing it of the poisoning and the burn, and with the energy assist, that's going to get Salazzle discarded from the board. So the Razors, this Verdant Cavern deck, still gets a point as the Oranguru does receive a second energy after having to discard two. And it is the Heatran being moved onto the board. This Raging Mad Strike, we've seen it many times before, 40 damage, but if it has damage on it, it does an additional 80. The Professor's Research pulled for the Blazers, they play it immediately, they get the big Melisata, they get the second Litten, and they've already got that second Torracat in hand, so the Litten immediately moved onto the bench, and the Poison Barb being placed onto Heatran as well. Get a second energy onto Torracat here as the Raging Mad Strike. Like we said, 40 damage because Heatran has not taken any damage, but this Poison Barb will ensure that it does, as it does take away 10 health from it. It comes back over to the Razors, who do pull the Young Goose. They're thinking about how best to approach this. They're hovering and they do get that third energy onto Oranguru. They're going to retreat the Delcatty. And they are moving Oranguru back into the active spot. They know what's going to happen. They just want to maximize their damage here with the Hammering. 70 damage onto the Heatran, bringing it down to 30 health. And Oranguru now having to contend with the poisoning just like Heatran. Heatran only has 20 health remaining, but that doesn't matter because this Oranguru is in discard range. 80 damage, but first they're also going to play the big Melisata, restoring that 10 health for the Heatran and curing it of that poisoning just in case it does any damage, but it's not going to because Oranguru is discarded from the board and this heel turn deck is going to take game 1. But as we have our first table reset, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like and subscribe so don't miss out on any of the action in the PokeType League TCG, as the Razors will once again be going first, this time with their Imperial Command deck, moving that that Squovit, the only active basic Pokemon they have, into the active spot. It is the Blacephalon, and you can see it's the full art card. That is one of the rewards of becoming the champion of the previous season that the Cinnabar Blazes were. It is the second Squovit being pulled for the Razors. They immediately move that onto the bench. They want to ensure that they do have a Pokemon on their bench. You do not want to lose a game because your bench is empty. We've seen that happen before, even when a side was 1 point away from winning. They had 1 point scored against them and lost it straight there as the Growlithe is pulled for the Blazers. They do get a first energy onto the Blacephalon and they play the Guzma immediately as well to get that Poison Barb discarded from the Squovit, knowing that Greedent can do additional damage if there is a Pokemon tool attached to it. The Ambipom is pulled for the Razors. They do get a first energy onto the Squovit here, and Blacephalon requires 3 energy, so there is a bit of setup being played as the Blazers pull the Professor's Research. Playing that, they get the 2 cards out of the deck. They get the Torkoal, they get the Beast Wall. That Beast Wall can reduce the damage that Blacephalon takes by 20 as long as the opposing side hasn't taken any points, and there have been no points scored so far in game 2. And they are setting up that Beast Wall here, so it will reduce the damage that Squovit can do to Blacephalon by 20. The Blazers also have that Arcanine in hand. We can see the Beastite and the Leftovers as well, their own Pokemon tools. The Apom is pulled for the Razors, immediately moved onto the bench. Squovit only requires 1 more energy, but instead they get the energy onto the Apom here. They're not going on the offensive with the Squovit. They don't see it worth going for that 10 damage as the second Blacephalon is pulled for the Cinnabar Blazers. A third energy onto the active Blacephalon, and with this Beat Punk, 130 damage on the Squovit, 70 damage to itself by the Blacephalon here. And it is the Apom being moved into the active spot as the Lillipup is pulled for the Razors. They've already got 2 rare candies in hand. Then they've got that Stoutland there. Ambipom only requires 1 more energy for the Corkscrew Punch with that Catch and Tail as well. They can get a Pokemon tool out of their deck, and that is exactly what they're going to do. Drawing out the leftovers, having to reshuffle their deck, and with this Corkscrew Punch, they get to wipe the Blacephalon off the board, capitalizing on the recoil damage that it did to itself. Razors able to get a point much quicker here with this Imperial Command deck. The Blazers opting to move the Torkoal into the active spot here. And they do pull the Pokeball. They can get another basic Pokemon out of their deck. It will either be the Growlithe or the Torkoal, and it is that second Torkoal being pulled from the deck here. Thinking about what they may want to do, they move the Torkoal onto the bench, taking their time. Are the Blazers with their Crimson Invasion deck. They move the Blacephalon onto the bench as well. If they can get a Lusamine, they can generate 2 energy from the discard pile onto Blacephalon, but it's still somewhere inside the deck as Torkoal receives its first energy for the Flamethrower, which does do 70 damage, but they do have to discard an energy when doing so. And the Greedent has been pulled for the Petalburg Razors as well, and they are going to play the rare candy, so they're going to get both Greedent and Stoutland online in this turn. They've got the leftovers. If they put that on Greedent, that enhanced Fang does an additional 50 damage, but it does require 3 energy. They do go for another Corkscrew Punch onto the Torkoal, halving its health. Stoutland just receiving its first of 2 required energy. The Repel pulled for the Blazers, and there it is, that second energy onto the Torkoal as well. With this Flamethrower, 70 damage, Ambipom will still have 20 health remaining. The Herdier being pulled for the Razors, but they don't need that right now because they've already got the Stoutland and they're ready to go, and they're going to retreat the Ambipom, moving Stoutland into the active spot, the opposing side, so the Blazers will require an additional energy if they want to be able to do damage to the Stoutland as well. But the Razors only need 1 more point to take game 2 and ensure that they will not drop this series in straight matches. The Growlithe is moved into the active spot. The Penny has been pulled. They can try and capitalize on a supporter card inside the deck of the Razors. That's exactly what they're going to do. It is the Lusamine, but there's no stage 2 Pokemon. So on the side of the Cinnabar Blazes, there aren't even any stage 2 Pokemon inside this deck. The Arcanine being moved into the active spot. It does require 3 energy to go on the offensive. It requires 3 energy just to retreat that Fire Main. Does 80 damage. And again, it would require an additional energy as well if it wants to hurt this Stoutland. As the Lusamine has been, sorry, not the Lusamine, the Lily, I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate me saying that she was Lusamine, being pulled from the deck of the Razors. 70 damage from the Stoutland on to the Arcanine. The Poison Barb has been pulled for the Blazers. They've got the leftovers, but that will not keep Arcanine away from being discarded by the Stoutland, so they just get the Poison Barb onto the Arcanine, potentially hoping that they can confuse the Razors and delay them, because the Razors only need 1 more point. They pull the Apom, they have generated another energy, but they're not worried about that. It is the Sharp Fang, and Arcanine is discarded from the board, and the Imperial Command deck will take game 2 over the Crimson Invasion deck as they're looking to bring this series back and redeem this Champions game loss, sorry, as we will have our final table reset here. And the Razors now once again going first with their Awakened Heroes deck. You can see the Type Null and the Celesteela are both in hand. They're going with the Type Null, it looks like, yes. In the active spot, the Celesteela on the bench for the Cinnabar Blazes. They've got their Weller Volcano deck, and it is the Fledgling. And even though it's a colorless type, it will evolve into a Fire type. We can already see the Talonflame in hand alongside the leftovers, the Lily, and the Professor's Research. It is the Ilima, the Poison Barb that was just pulled, the Beastite, and the Big Malasada for the Razors, and they immediately get the Poison Barb onto Type Null. They want to try and deter the Blazers from using this Fletchling of the Weller Volcano deck from going on the offensive, because that Flap does 20 damage. It is the Kiawe being pulled for the Blazers as well, the Pokeball and the Turtonator, and that's where Kiawe comes in, but they can't use Kiawe right now. What Kiawe does, generates 2 energy immediately for a Turtonator, but it ends their turn immediately. The Fletchling being moved onto the bench that was pulled thanks to the Pokeball. The Turtonator also, that full art design being moved onto the bench. And there is a single energy being set up for the Fletchling here. That Flap, 20 damage onto the Type. No, bring it down to only 60 health. But there is that Poison Barb coming into play as well. 10 damage onto the Fletchling as it comes back over to the Razors. They pull the Penny. We saw this earlier. They can capitalize on a supporter card in the deck of the Walla Volcano, of the Cinnabar Blazes, and it is the Guzma, who is no use to them at the moment because there are no Pokemon tools on the side of the Pokemon Blazes, of the Cinnabar Blazes, not the Pokemon Blazes. And with that head flip as well, this quick blow does an additional 20 damage, so 40 damage. Fletchling is discarded from the board. The Razors take the first point with their Awakened Heroes deck in game 3, taking that quick lead, but Turtonator moved into the active spot. 120 health as well. Fletchinder has been pulled for the Blazes, immediately moved on to that Fletchling. It only requires 1 energy as well with that steady fire breathing. The Kiawe almost played onto the Turtonator. They do move an energy onto it, and now they're going to play the Kiawe. So there's already that 3 energy onto the Turtonator here as the Razors pull their second type null. Still no Silvally in hand. The Razors thinking about how they want to approach this. They choose to get an energy onto the type null on the bench. Another quick blow. They want to flip another heads and get that additional 20 damage, but they get the tails, so it's only 20 damage this time onto the Turtonator, but that brings it down to 100 health. If they can get a Brave Buddy Silvally with a supporter, it can do upwards of 100 damage, but here is the Talonflame being pulled for the Blazers, immediately moved onto the bench. It does require 2 energy, it does receive its first here. The leftovers being put onto Turtonator, a very intelligent play, trying to keep it out of discard range, and with this Fire Spin, they do have to discard an energy, but the Razors have to discard the type null, but the Poison Barb as well has come into play. The leftovers will try to offset this, but it will still keep Turtonator at 100 health as the second type null is moved into the active spot. There's the 10 health being restored for the Turtonator. There it is being lost thanks to the poisoning. The Razors pulling the Silvally as well, but they've only got the Ilima in hand, who does retreat into the hand of the Razors as Colorless type that has taken damage. Neither of them have taken damage, so this Brave Buddies is only going to do 50 damage to the Turtonator. And we say only, but it does halve its health. That poisoning doing an additional 10. The second Fletchinder pulled for the Blazers, and there is a third energy back onto the Turtonator that will have to discard as soon as it does this 90 damage with the Fire Spin to the Silvally. Poisoning and leftovers continuing to go back and forth as now the Gladion is pulled for the Razors. They can use this. This will allow them to maximize the damage of the Silvally as they pull their second Silvally, who's actually no good to them anymore. The type null was discarded. The Celesteela does receive its first energy, and with the Brave Buddies 100 damage onto the Turtonator, the Razors are 1 point away from taking this series over the Cinnabar Blazers. But it is the Talonflame being moved into the active spot. With this Fire Wing, it only requires 1 more energy to do 90 damage. The second Turtonator has been pulled for the Blazers as well. They immediately move that onto the bench. Talonflame also has 120 health, but this Fire Wing is going to tie things up. We have a 1-point game. Whoever gets the next point, sudden death, will be this series winner and get those 2 victory points counted towards the leaderboard. It is going to be Celesteela moved into the active spot. That Moonbirthon requires 3 energy. It is the Professor's Research being pulled for the Razors. They do get that second energy though. That Moonbirthon 100 damage. The leftovers, the Gladion. And with that said though, the Moonbirthon, they do have to flip a coin. If it's tails, it does nothing. The Blazers have just pulled the Poison Barb. They are going to get that onto the Talonflame. Talonflame still has 120 health, and that Fire Wing, 90 damage. Celesteela has 120 health. Talonflame bringing the heat here as Celesteela only has 30 health remaining. The Razors pulling the Kamala, and they're going to play the Beast Type. This will take the Moonbirthon damage up to 120, which means if they flip a heads, they will win this game. There's the third energy for the Moonbirthon, and it will be the moment of truth. They get the heads, they win. They get the tails, they will lose. And it's a tails. The Razors get the tails. This is what the Blazers needed. This frees up Talonflame. 120 health. It would not have outlasted that hit, but it has survived. And with this Fire Wing, Celesteela is discarded. And our reigning champions in our Champions Game rematch have taken the series win. An impressive fashion, and this moves them up into 5th place as next round they are going up against the Levincia Wonders, whereas for the Razors, they're now up in 8th place, and next round they'll be going up against the Lucid Frontiers. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what cards you pulled today, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.